Let's start by dismantling the myth of the gold standard. If you look at a traditional hierarchy of evidence pyramid, especially in the health sciences, you'll almost always see randomized control trials, RCTs, and statistical meta-analyses at the very top. Case studies and qualitative interviews are often pushed to the bottom. This structure implicitly teaches us that numbers are true and stories are merely anecdotal. But in transdisciplinary research, this hierarchy is problematic. It assumes that context doesn't matter. We need to reframe our inquiry. We must learn to view quantitative methods as just one way of knowing. They provide a specific type of insight, breadth, frequency, magnitude, but they are not the only source of objective truth. We are shifting our mindset from numbers as truth to numbers as perspective. A perspective is valuable, but it is always partial. It sees some things clearly and blinds us to others. To use a tool effectively, you have to know exactly what it's good for. You don't use a hammer to turn a screw. So, when is quantitative inquiry best utilized? Its primary strength lies in scale. Survey research is fantastic for capturing broad trends across large populations. If you need to know how 10,000 people feel about a policy, you can't interview them all. You need a survey. Secondly, correlational studies are powerful for identifying relationships between variables. Does income level correlate with health outcomes? Statistics can tell us that with precision. And finally, the superpower of quantitative work is generalizability. It allows us to take a representative sample and make mathematical inferences about a much larger group. It answers questions like, what is happening? And how much is it happening? And is it happening everywhere? These are critical questions, and quantitative tools are the best way to answer them. However, every strength has a corresponding weakness. Quantitative methods struggle significantly when faced with wicked problems. A wicked problem is a complex, entangled social issue like systemic poverty, climate justice, or educational inequality. These problems resist simple quantification because they are dynamic. The variables are constantly changing and interacting in unpredictable ways. This creates a gap. Quantitative methods have inherent limitations here because they require stable variables to measure, but wicked problems are defined by their instability and uniqueness. The biggest risk here is reductionism. In order to make a complex human experience fit into a spreadsheet, we have to strip away the context. We turn a struggling family into a data point labeled low income. We lose the history, the struggle, and the nuance. In solving wicked problems, that stripped away context is often exactly where the solution lies. This brings us to a core concept of this course, critical transdisciplinarity. This isn't just about combining disciplines, it's about applying a critical lens to the production of knowledge itself. When we look at a statistical report, a critical transdisciplinary researcher doesn't just ask, what do the numbers say? They ask, how were these numbers created? We do not passively accept data as a neutral fact. We interrogate the methods used to collect it. We examine the power dynamics inherent in the analysis. Who decided what to measure? Who decided what categories to use? Statistics are not born, they are made, and they are made by people with specific worldviews and biases. Critical transdisciplinarity requires us to make those invisible power dynamics visible. One of the most important places to apply this critical lens is in cultural validity. We have a major problem in the social sciences. Many of our standardized measurement tools, surveys, psychological scales, IQ tests, were developed in what researchers call weird contexts. That stands for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. Now, there's nothing wrong with that context, but there is a problem when we assume that a tool developed for a college student in the US will work perfectly for a farmer in rural India or an indigenous elder in Canada. We must question the cultural validity of our tools. Just because a survey is statistically valid in one culture doesn't mean it measures anything meaningful in another. Concepts like happiness, success, or even time, can vary wildly. If we don't account for this, we risk gathering data that looks rigorous but is actually meaningless or misleading. This discussion leads us directly to the concept of epistemic justice. Episteme relates to knowledge. So, epistemic justice is about the fair distribution of credibility and the recognition that there are diverse ways of knowing the world. In quantitative research, we have to ask the critical question, whose reality do our numbers represent? Often, aggregate statistics represent the reality of the majority, effectively erasing the reality of minorities. If our data silences the lived experience of marginalized groups, if we say, the statistics say you are doing fine, when a community is screaming that they are suffering, we are committing epistemic violence. Our goal is to prevent this. We want our numbers to amplify diverse realities, not overwrite them. So, how do we practice epistemic justice practically? First, we must focus on disaggregation. We need to stop lumping everyone together into big averages that hide disparities. We need to break data down by race, gender, location, and class to see who is falling through the cracks. Second, we need participatory design. Instead of the researcher deciding what variables to measure, we involve the community. We ask them, what matters to you? What should we be counting? And finally, we need to be careful with interpretation, specifically regarding outliers. In traditional statistics, an outlier is often seen as noise or an error to be cleaned up. But from a justice perspective, an outlier might be a marginalized voice. It might be the canary in the coal mine. We must ensure that these unique data points are not dismissed just to make our regression line look prettier. Another crucial ethical component is data sovereignty. This is especially relevant when working with indigenous communities or vulnerable populations. The core question is, who owns the data? Historically, researchers have operated like miners. They go into a community, extract the valuable data, and leave to refine it in the university, leaving the community with nothing. We need to move from extraction to reciprocity. Does the community benefit from this data? Do they have access to it? Can they use it for their own advocacy? We also need transparency. In an age of big data and AI, we must be clear about how algorithms and models will utilize this data. Will it be used to help the community, or will it be used to surveil or police them? These are ethical obligations that go far beyond a standard IRB form. In conclusion, how do we integrate quantitative methods into our transdisciplinary toolbox? It comes down to three things: selection, complementarity, and humility. First, select the tool based on the problem. Use quantitative methods when your question demands scale, when you need to see broad patterns across a system. Second, embrace complementarity. Recognize that numbers are skeletons. They need the flesh and blood of narrative to be fully understood. Always pair your stats with stories. And finally, practice humility. A p-value is not a proof of absolute reality. It is merely a probability of a relationship found in a specific sample at a specific time. If we can hold our numbers loosely and use them ethically, they become a powerful force for understanding our complex world. To summarize Lesson 3.1, we have completely reframed quantitative research. It is a tool, not the master key to truth. We should use it for its strengths, scale and correlation, but we must remain constantly vigilant against the dangers of reductionism. And finally, we must always apply a critical lens, assessing our tools for cultural validity and striving for epistemic justice in every analysis we perform. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your